I'd like to invite our guest on stage. Florian, please come on stage. Dein Mikro ist hinter dir.
Hey everyone. Can you hear me or no, it's turned off, right? Can you hear me now? Okay, cool.
Okay, everybody settled? Florian, nice to see you in Vienna. It's not too easy to get hold of you as far as I know. Before we start, who of you in the audience knows Codeship? That's quite okay, isn't it?
Yes.
We're working on it.
Non-developer audience, or mostly probably non-developer audience, that's pretty good.
Let's ask, how many developers in the audience?
So basically the same people who already know about Codeship. That's good.
I think you've got 100%. Yeah. That's quite right.
I like that.
Okay, Florian, maybe tell us a bit about your upbringing, where you come from, because so we get some little insight how you came to grow a company and now have 3 spots on earth where you are and never in Vienna. So where do you grow up? What is your family background?
Sure. So I grew up in Vienna. My family is from Lower Austria. Background, I don't know.
What do your parents do?
Work is in banks, basically, both of them. Although my father studied political science, which does make no sense with banks, but he just like
in Austria it does make a lot of sense.
I agree.
Anyway,
but no technology or anything like that. Like my father was very technology interested, but not like a technologist at all. Although he did learn coding in his bank at some point, which I really liked. So
political scientist who learned coding at a bank.
Yes, exactly. Excel, basically Visual Basic stuff, to be more proficient. And I think that was right around the time when I started to learn coding. I started to code in school, so that was kind of interesting. I think had maybe somehow a push in that direction that I saw that as well.
So you did what kind of school did you do?
Gymnasium.
Okay.
So with a IT focus. So from the 5th class on, in gymnasium I had IT, and then studied at Technical University Vienna, and then nearly finished it. So I only have to write my master's thesis. I finished all the courses.
There's 2 of us on stage.
Yeah,
that's nice to see.
2 months or something left. The topic was, so the idea was that I would write about basically what we were doing at Codeship. And then I thought to myself, like, I could either write about what I'm doing at Codeship or I could actually do it at Codeship. So I'd rather do that and just basically kind of never came back.
But if you accumulate all your blog posts, maybe that fits for a master thesis.
Yes. So the amount that I've written so far is definitely probably more.
Yeah, probably you should go to some kind of professor and say, that's my thesis.
That's the plan for whenever we exit Codeship.
So 2 months, 3 months.
I don't think so.
Anyway, so you started at Vienna University of Technology, and as far as you know, you had some Sun relation.
Yeah, so I was the Sun University, what is it called? Basically the guy who pushed Sun technology when Sun still existed, which was a while ago, to students. Basically, so what I did is I founded the Java student user group. At that point I still coded in Java. And so we had meetings where I met some of the people here, Tosh specifically, wherever he is in the room, and some other coders from the Technical University. And so we did like monthly meetups basically, and then I got to meet the people from Sun, and so I somehow because I organized the group and got money for it in some way. That was basically what I did for a couple of months.
Kind of a little entrepreneur inside university.
Yeah, totally. I think that was something. I mean, starting the JSOC and then co-starting with a bunch of other people. Start Europe, which is now the Pioneers Festival.
How did that come along? I've read about that, but like, how were you dragged into that?
So the idea was, and I think that's a common problem here that it still exists, is that the Austrian university system has a huge issue in that there is a technical university, there is a Hauptuniversität and the business university, and they're completely separate in separate spaces, which is total bullshit. Can I swear here?
Oh, swear a lot.
Okay,
we
cool.
love swearing.
Perfect. Which is total bullshit, because the problem is, like, to start a company, if you're just technologists, that can be a large issue. If you don't have any tech people, you will probably not be able to found a tech company. So that mix would be extremely helpful. But because in comparison to the American system or English system, where you have a lot of different topics in the same university, you don't have that mix, basically. And what I've seen in school, so I went to school next to a HAC. So a lot of my friends went there and then studied business. So when I
So the girls basically.
no, all guys. So basically, when I was in university, I was one of the very few people who kind of knew a lot of business people, like that studied business administration, and most of the other tech people there in university just didn't know anyone. And I always thought like that's a huge issue, and like we somehow need to solve that. And so at the time, so we had the JSAG, and Frederick de Bong, who's from My Sugar, and was part of the JSAG as well, and we discussed it, and we might have also discussed it with other people from the JSAG probably. I don't remember exactly whom. I'm really sorry. But I know other people still. But yeah, we basically wrote like a short thing what we think we should do about that. And then there was INITS, which is basically a business university student organization that does some stuff. And so we wanted to talk to some student organization like from the business university. And so one guy from them, Roland, just sent me an email, hey, want to do something together? Because they had the exact same idea, just from the other side. Basically, we met for coffee, said, hey, like, here's what we want to do. Like, let's do this. So we kept working on this, which is like now, I shouldn't say it is now the Pioneers Festival, but the idea was at that point to do it like kind of like a startup conference thing. Pioneers Festival is way bigger and wasn't done by the same people at all, so I don't claim any kind of influence on that at all. But so we then switched to doing Startup Weekend kind of style events, Startup Lives. Did that for a number of years. And pretty early on, like other people like Andreas Jaas and Jürgen and all the others that are running it still. And one of them was also Mo, then my co-founder, one of my two co-founders. Did way more, like they really scaled it and really made it really big. But those two were like the first things where I like helped start something kind of. And yeah, and then there I met Moritz, and I know my second co-founder, Manu, from school. So I've known him forever. Basically every project I do, I just pull him in and say like, hey, do help me.
So basically, Moritz, you met there, and then you worked there together. So
exactly.
You know you will fit. You're kind of a fit, and then
exactly. And I know he was like he's programmed as well in school. So he studied business administration. So he's not a coder in and of itself, or he didn't like a software engineer. But he knew what it is. He can code, and I knew he wanted to get back into tech at some point. So I just basically came up with the idea and said like, hey, we want to like work on this.
So how do you came up with the idea? And was the idea Codeship at the beginning, or was there something else?
So the basic premise, so for everybody who doesn't know what Codeship is basically whenever developers in your team change something and open that up to the rest of the team and share it with their team, we automatically take those latest changes and run a couple of automated tests on top of those. So you always know very fast that if somebody on your team changes something, does it break my application or not? If you know that like a minute after the change, that's very easy to fix. If you know it 2 weeks later when you want to do release and everything is fucked, then you have a big problem. So that's basically what Codeship is. And I was basically Codeship inside of all the teams that I've worked in before, because I was the guy who was responsible or cared about setting up this kind of process and workflow. And it was painful and it sucked and I hated it. So I thought like, why not devote myself to exactly this problem for a long time that I really, really, really hate and just solve it nicely. And so that was the idea. It was basically the same. I mean, of course, it grew from then. Like the industry grew and like where it's going now. But the premise is basically still the same. So it hasn't really changed. There hasn't been a kind of pivot or anything at all.
As somebody who's in software development for 15 years already, I love what you do. It's like one of the most painful things that are, which is quality and trying to get things to run. And then somebody's like, oh yeah, I fixed that 2 months ago. And then no, it doesn't work.
Yes.
So that was in 2011 you decided to give it a go, do that.
So we started in like end of 2010, we started implementing the prototype and we had it online in May of 2011. So it's been like the system itself has been running for over 4 years now, so quite a bit. We really started doing it full time in June 2012.
In between you had like normal jobs or were you still studying?
University and freelancing basically. So in 2011 I decided to like, I don't really want to do this university thing anymore, so I'll just freelance on the side to...
Are you still enrolled in university?
No. They kick you out at some point automatically.
No, trust me, you can. I'm enrolled.
So I think you have to pay at some point, and at that point I said like, whatever.
It's 15 euros a semester. Trust me, as long as you earn money.
Is it that maybe?
Trust me.
I think I disenrolled when it's like hey, I'm really like a very poor founder, like not even 15 euros. Like that's 3 beers or 5 beers.
All right.
So that's better.
I wasn't poor enough yet, it seems.
No, I don't think I'm enrolled anymore, but I might be. Yeah, and so we decided 2012 to do it full time. Got into Seed Camp then.
Was it right along, or did you do like?
So we tried Seed Camp in 2011. We didn't get in 2011. Tosh and Blossom got in. I don't know where they are. So we did the same event. Then a year later, we applied as well. Completely different setup, and I think we grew a lot in that year in terms of how we presented ourselves. And then got in. And
What was the major differences between the 2011, 2012? Like
took it seriously.
Okay.
I think that was the big difference. I think it was clear for us, like this is something that we do now, and this is something that isn't just a side project, but this is like we're following through on this one. And I think that leads to a different outset, how you present yourself, the things that we thought about, having a year more experience with the product, more users, more customers not at that point, but more users really helped. So all this kind of stuff really helped us a lot.
So you got in Seed Camp. How was that? Like how was?
So Seed Camp specifically for us, it was more.
Maybe simply explain what Seed Camp.
So Seed Camp is an investor, basically a seed investor, and they also have kind of a program where they specifically help teams, especially in their London office. So if you are in London, that really helps. For us, we didn't really go through that program at all. So we just got the money basically. What it really helped us with, though, is getting into Techstars. That really helped because they already did a couple of deals before, and they could put a couple of names in. So it wasn't just, hey, you're a Seed Camp team, so you get into Techstars. Not even close. But it definitely helped to have some kind of trust and like somebody that pre-vetted you, and that Techstars people could somehow talk to, and having more network. Other investors that are invested in Seed Camp and also are invested in Techstars that we talked to before. Like there's a couple of connections that really helped us get into Techstars and like push them a little more.
So how long was the difference between Seed Camp and Techstars and?
So we did Seed Camp in October. We moved to Berlin in November, and we got into Techstars in January, and we started Techstars on the 25th of February, 2013.
And Techstars took how long? Like
3 months.
3 months program.
Yes.
And
that was intense. That was really, really intense. That was really good, but really, really intense.
So you recommend it?
I definitely, especially for first-time founders. If people can get into any kind of those programs, especially as a first-time founder, you have to do it. It doesn't like if you think about you have to give up equity for that, and you're even thinking about it as a first-time founder. In my opinion, you're doing it wrong, because you learn so much more from that than the equity that you give up. And there's definitely companies who are discussing it and like thinking about it. And if you have a better deal or like make a lot of money than already with your product, then that might be something that you can think about. If you're really early with the product, not a lot of traction or customers, in my opinion, you should not ever say no to a Techstars or any other of those high league accelerators, because they're really incredibly valuable. And I think the more valuable stuff is going forward the network. I think the 3 months is just the beginning. Like you have a large network. I can reach out to any Techstars company and get their help on something. And I think that's really, really incredible. I can just, like it's a badge, and I can just say like, hey, we're another Techstars company, another Techstars CTO or whatever. And they'll just be more likely to help me than somebody. So that really helps.
So, but that was basically your kind of angel round or like your seed round with Techstars and Seed Camp. But there's also a couple of others, like first-time investors I've had a look up, at least if it's correct what's on Crunchbase. Then there's like a couple of people and like 3 organizations, Techstars, Seed Camp, and some venture. Vienna. So how did you come along those different people, and at what stages did they invest? Because I guess it wasn't one round, was it? So it's
so the angels. So the angels, we did a couple of angels during Seed Camp. They were roughly, so we did about 300,000 during it at Techstars, roughly, including the Techstars note and everything. And then in Techstars, you meet a lot of investors. And then you have a lot of intense conversations, especially Mo, our CEO. And then at the end of the year, at the end of 2013, we met our lead investor now, lead investor for our last round. So we raised about 2.7 million at the beginning of 2014, and we met John through people we knew during Techstars. So somebody else, I don't know the full story by head now, But I think Mo got introduced to somebody who introduced him to John, who's a very respected and long-time investor in Boston. And so that's how we met him, had a couple of conversations. I met him once in San Francisco at the time when I was there. I was very sick and met him in the morning in Starbucks, and it must have been horrible for him. But I don't know, maybe he thought like, if that guy comes like this into the meeting, like at least he fights or something. I don't know.
So look sick. That's a
Yeah,
good.
I was visibly very, very sick, and I think that I probably shouldn't have taken that meeting. But yeah, I was obviously not feeling well. But
taking a step back, what was your major improvements on product and on market in between, like you starting as full-time team here and then coming to that round? Like, what was the major, maybe some learnings that you can share with the audience?
I think in terms of product, it wasn't like we definitely like improved and we did more stuff, but I think that wasn't the big thing. I think the big thing and why those people invested in us is not because of product, but because of the people there. Because of, primarily, of course, they have to believe in Mo as a CEO to be able to scale the company and build the company, but also in all the other co-founders and in the other people we hired at that point, to be able to bring on and scale the company. I think that, investment at that stage and later on is always about, is the company, or especially in those rounds, it's about, can the company be built to a point where it's just about growth? So can the CEO build a team? Can they attract enough talent? Is the product interesting enough, of course? So they definitely had us vetted by other portfolio companies and had us talk to other portfolio companies. So that was something in terms of the product to better understand it and market, and they vetted the market. But I think a lot of it is about, does John specifically trust Moritz to build the company? And then does John trust me and Manny as the founding team and the basically executives at that point to build the company? And I think that's really what it's all about. I think there's a ton of companies in interesting markets with something that where it's interesting, like the product is interesting, the traction is kind of interesting, but then it's all about the people. Like, does somebody believe that you as a person can scale this? I think you have to get it to a growth point, and later investment rounds are more like, then it's really just about the numbers. Like, can we make the numbers work and can we make them churn better? Because at some point you just, like, if it doesn't work with a specific person, you just replace them with another person when you're fully in growth mode, which happens in startups and it's totally fine. But I think in the early rounds, it's really about people. Can those people make it through the very hard stages that are ahead to a point where you're in growth mode?
I've got a couple of interesting names as customers. When did you get like your first big names or bigger names that people know about? Was that before that round or after that round, or?
For us, all of our customers are big names, but no. So I think that was that was cheesy. I know. So really, I think after the round, so really bigger names. Like we had a couple of teams where like in some larger company, like a team here and a team there, I think that showed that we are able to like go into larger companies and convince them and like. But I think it wasn't really about specifically any number or any specific large team, anything like that. I think so. What they did a lot is like we introduced them to customers, but also teams that we knew. That knew our market, even people who aren't customers and couldn't be customers for even now, like a year or two, but people who knew and understand the problem and could talk to them why we solve it in an interesting way and that longer term. So for example, we had somebody who like did large enterprise systems in banks. Like we're not going to have large enterprise banks as customers for a number of years. That's just not going to happen because that's not where the system is at the moment and the growth phase. But he understands the market, he understands where we're going. And so he was able to translate what we're currently doing right now, visualizing where we're going to be in the future and why a bank is paying us $1 million a year or something for our product. And so that really helped. Like things like that were done during the fundraising, where I just walked him through the whole product and then he basically took that and talked to the investor for us. And that was just basically a friend. I wouldn't even call him a friend, a really nice guy that we met through Techstars. So Texas, that was really helpful.
We hear it. It's Techstars. It's all about
network. Network is really, really helpful. And if you have something that is a commonality between people, that just helps a lot. If you something like you went through kind of the same thing, I can talk to any Techstars. When I meet somebody from the same accelerator program, I can just talk to them about like, hey, remember the time you were in Techstars and like prepared for demo day. And I can talk an hour about the topic because we all have a lot of stories to tell. And it builds trust, it builds commonality. Like, that helps.
So that all sounds very smooth.
Yeah, it sounds like that. It wasn't.
So maybe you've got one or two stories that are like
I think
that you're allowed to tell.
So I think, I mean, in general, like I think that's a general startup thing. Like it's the highs are really, really, really high, and the lows are really fucking low. And bad days are way worse than you can imagine. And the next day can be a great day because you lost a good customer, and the next day you gained a better customer. But the day when you lost a good customer is really shitty because that can always be suck. Or like when you have founding meetings, or like when you do funding, and like you get a no. And everybody gets no's, tons of no's on every funding meeting, but it still feels kind of shitty. But then at some point you might get a yes or something. I think it's really hard to pinpoint a specific story. Like there's so many things that are constantly ups and downs. Like with people, like you hire a really great person, or another really great person turns out to just not be the right fit. Like that's not fun. To have to fire somebody or like to grow. So I think it's all ups and downs all the time, and it's like you can learn a lot through all of this. But I think so that's why having good co-founders is critical, and people that you trust and that you can work with, and that you can get through hard times. Because, and not just hard times from like something out from the outside hard happens, because there's definitely times where you're gonna fight, or where you're gonna do something shitty to somebody, like where it's not like where, because it's so stressful and where it's just not working out for a while. In a way where you can talk about it and get over it is really key. So really good co-founders, and I'm really happy to have like the best co-founders. That really helps.
Co-founders, a good point. So you had three of you. How did you, all of you, like translate, and especially of course your role, change over the years, and what is your view now? Because of course probably you started as the tech guy in the team, the pure tech guy, and now you're definitely a different role. How did that translate, and what did you learn out of it, and what you can maybe some learnings out of it that some of us in the audience can translate to?
I think something that I certainly learned in my role. I mean for Mo, the role of CEO was pretty early. And for Manny, I think a lot of things have changed. He's more of a designer and did advertisement in the past and is now in marketing. And so he had a couple of role changes there, which he mastered, and he's great at marketing now. For me, I was the tech guy. I was the guy who built everything. And then I was like, then other people who built things came in, and then I built less, and then I built less, and then I built nothing at some point. And I do a lot of like marketing stuff. Like I do a lot of blog posts. I talk to a lot of people. I think so a lot of people code in our team. I'm the person who talks about coding all the time to whoever is interested. I do a lot of sales stuff. I think I'm like, I think the role of the CTO, and I think that's something that is very important for potential tech people who want to go in that direction. I think one thing that is incredibly important, and I do differently or other in a future team, is have a conversation very early on if what you expect your role to be in the future, especially as a tech person, because if you don't, you might just go into a direction where you're not coding all day, and that's oftentimes not very fun, because I really like coding and I've been doing it for quite a long time at this point, and not being able to do it when you build a company to build something can sometimes feel kind of shitty on some days, because you have to do like emails. So like my editor, like yesterday I bought a new email editor, and I'm an email client, and I'm super excited about my new email client. So this tells you how much time I spend in email and how little time I spend in my terminal or something else. So email is really, really important for me, because that's my work pretty much most of the day. And that might not be okay for some people. And there's definitely times where it's not okay for me, because it's not fun to write emails all day. But that's just what it is. And I think it's important to have this discussion early on with your co-founders and say like, look, and I know many, many other founders who did that, who said, I'm going to be the guy who codes this. I'm going to be the chief architect, the whatever. I might lead the engineering team or whatever. But I'm always going to be extremely close to our product and our code. So I'm not going to be the tech guy who goes out on sales calls. I'm just not going to be that person. I think having that discussion early on is really key, because otherwise your role will change a lot, and you will only notice when it's late in the game, and then you can really turn back. And then you have to come to grips with that, which can be fine. Like, it's a fun job, it's an interesting job in many ways, but you won't be coding anymore. And for some people, that's not okay. And that's totally fine. And yeah, so I have friends who, like 3 co-founders, one of them is the CTO, goes on sales calls, one of them is the CEO, the third is just the tech guy who looks after their infrastructure or main architect or whatever his title is. And he's happy, everybody else is happy, and that's cool.
So when did you decide to move to the US, and what were the major reasons, or was it only because that's where the money is?
So for us, as a developer product, we have to be in the US. We have to have especially longer term sales and business development, all that kind of stuff, partnerships in the US. So that the opportunity we always wanted to. The opportunity with Boston came up, so we took the opportunity and moved there. If we could have gone earlier, we would have gone earlier. I think that was, especially in our market, is pretty clear. I don't think necessarily every company has to go to the US. I think developer products without a presence in the US, it's a lot harder. I think, but generally it's not just necessary. Of course, if you need a lot of funding, it's just really hard in Europe to get meaningful funding in a lot of ways. It's also really hard to get like very small funding in the beginning, like angel rounds seem to still be kind of problematic, especially in comparison to the US.
Recently, I had a little conversation with an experienced serial Viennese entrepreneur, not telling names because he doesn't want it, and he had some funny stories to tell about the Austrian grant system, which has its pros and cons. Did you actually have any?
From the beginning, so Moritz with Start Europe did a lot of grants. From the beginning, it was very clear we wouldn't apply, we wouldn't try, because I think the Austrian grant system for a tech startup is a huge waste of time. And I've seen many friends go through the grant system and waste a huge amount of time. Some of them in the audience. So I think that's. I think I totally understand it, and especially if you want to if you plan to fully stay in Vienna and never leave Vienna with a company, that you can think about it. If you ever think I might go to Berlin with this, don't do grants, because they bind you to Austria. You have to spend a lot of time, a lot of energy. On the grants and on following through and presenting and all this kind of bullshit that you really don't want to do when you build a company. So it's just painful. And I think the grant system, I think one of the fundamental misunderstandings of the grant system is that when I invest in 10 people, from those 10 people, or in 10 people who all go to the US and they get rich there, and 2 people come back and 8 people stay there, that's awesome. That's great for Austria. That's because we have 2 people here that can do something here. I think that's a great return on investment. I think the problem is the Austrian grant system seems to be, at least from what I've understood in the past, built on the assumption that we want all of those 10 things here, because that will be better than having 2 really good people coming back. And I think that's a huge issue. I think binding people with grants into the country too much won't result won't necessarily go to good results, or better results than giving them money, investing in companies, and then letting them do whatever is best for them, and then hope in some parts hoping, but I think thinking about how can I, when they are successful, get them back into Austria instead of just binding them here.
Similar to what I was told as well, and I had my experiences as well in the granting system. So we almost we're quite a lot into time. I'd like to switch over to your view on the future. Like, what is your core market doing at the moment? I had a look up on your competitors and or maybe competitors. Some I didn't understand them as competitors, but okay. And also your view on development, what you learned, what do you think you should like give back to the Viennese audience, what they should like really look forward to, because it's always a bit like dragged along until stuff hits here.
So I think in general, like regarding developers market or something like a software market, I think in the future every company is a software company. Absolutely every company. And if you are another software company today, another software company will come in and take over your market. See Uber, see Amazon, see Netflix, see whatever. Those were all like the competitors from them were all non-software companies, and they are getting beaten badly by software companies. And I think so that's something, a fundamental understanding that a lot of people need to develop, is that it's not just about product, but it's how am I productive in building my product? How can I move faster than my competition? How can I build great software? And with that, great products that push incumbents that do not have good software out of the market. And I think so thinking about what are good processes, how can I be better? How can I build something and build a good team? How can I get the best people in software engineering, even though I'm not a software company or like not a developer product or something like that? But how can I build a company that has very great software engineering? And you see a lot of examples, like Netflix, of course, is very well known for their engineering team. SoundCloud is well known for their engineering team. Etsy is extremely well known for their engineering team. All of them are not, their core product is not software at all. And they are extremely well known in the whole industry for having great engineering teams. And I think that's something that every company needs to understand, that good software engineers, good software engineer practices, good teams are key to building your products in any market going forward. Let's say any. There's probably some exemptions, but it's in any market. So you really have to think about, like, how am I going to build a great team and an interesting team that is able to push very quickly forward. And I think that goes beyond just our product or something, but I think that's something that every entrepreneur has to think about. And I think there's some problems with that, where software engineering, at least by some people, is seen as a commodity that can be easily exchanged, and like one software engineer is kind of like another. And that's not really how it works at all. Like, that's not how it works. And I think that's really critical for every entrepreneur to understand, that at the base of every product they build, every company they build, there is software, and you need to be world class at your software. And if there are software processes, then you can build a world class company. But I think a lot of people will have a really, really hard time to do it the other way around, especially today.
No, it's not yet question answer time, but in a couple of minutes, it's fine.
And Vienna, and I think specifically for Vienna, I think one of the biggest issues, and I think one of the things why we moved away, I think feedback culture here in Austria is terrible. I think it's absolutely terrible, and I think it's in two ways. I think from the one side, I think it's not introspective enough on people themselves, like, well, how can I improve and push really hard forward? And I think on the other side, people try to be way too nice to others, and I think that's an issue. Because it's not pushing others enough. And on the other side, people who do not get enough hard feedback don't ask for it enough. And I think that's something an experience that I certainly had before we went to Berlin and Vienna, and why we felt we needed to leave, because we didn't feel enough pressure to go, like, to do something. And I think that's something where, like, there was these startup meetings, and like nobody really went ahead, like nobody really did something. Like, every month we met and nobody really did a big step forward. And so there wasn't enough push, and nobody was there saying, like, what the fuck? Like, why are you not, like, you have obviously a great product, like the people like it, like, why are you making so small steps? And I think that's, like, there isn't enough push on that side. And on the other side, there isn't enough asking for that. There isn't anybody saying, look, it's very nice that you think it's all nice and shiny what we're doing here, but, like, seriously, what is wrong here? Like, what are we doing wrong? What do we need to do better? And really give me really hard feedback and asking for it. And if they don't tell you, ask more and more. And I think that's something where that's very different from what I've seen in other places. And the other places that I've been to are very selective, like with Techstars, that's a system specifically built around this kind of feedback. So that's selective. But I think that's something that is crucial, like getting this kind of feedback, getting pushed by people, and then you really see where you have to be, and then working yourself to the bone is really key.
You talked about how selective Techstars is and the others, and currently I see a rising is good to say, like a huge amount of accelerators popping up everywhere, and startups supporting stuff everywhere, which I find is great for the community in general. But on the other hand, then I have a look into detail into the stuff, and I'm not really convinced about it. What's your view on that, and what do you think would be needed in Vienna, not only Vienna, in the European market, because that's what it is, that's what we should aim for, at least at the minimum, and worldwide, of course. What is missing here?
So I think, on one side, there is now this startup service market. So startups become a big enough part of the ecosystem that you can earn money by helping startups. Which in some ways can be good. like if you're a developer and you work for a startup as a freelancer, that's good. But there's professional, like people who give professional advice and like then get paid for shit. And I think that's not really cool. And so I think like there's a lot of these accelerators who take way too much equity, who give way too little money, who give way too little help or anything like that. And like making an accelerator is now kind of like it's not just something that they're interested in or not, but it's more of like a job, which is, I mean, of course, Texas is a business as well, but it's very different from I think a lot of smaller accelerators or like those Me Too accelerators that have been popping up. So I think being very selective of who you give equity to definitely makes sense in that regard, and track record. And I think that's something that certainly we did, and like Techstars and others advise, and I can certainly advise, like go talk to other people who went through the same thing. Like if they went through the accelerator, and ask them, would you do it again? And if they say no, then don't do it, basically. Or if enough people say no, and the reasons are fine, then just don't do the accelerator. So I think that those kind of startup service industry that is developing is, I think, a huge issue, because I think that just means startups are now cool, and I think people are wasting money on like other people helping kind of them when there's nothing really going on, instead of like putting their own time into getting building product or getting customers. So I'm not really the biggest fan of those, all of the Me Too and the ecosystem that builds around the startup ecosystem.
Finally, before we go to questions and answers, where's Codeship developing to? As far as you currently see, what will Codeship be about? What will it be about? You already see, but like, what's the big things that's going on currently within your company that you can talk about? That are you developing that you can see that maybe are interesting for the audience?
In terms of specific products, or in general the direction?
In general, the direction.
I mean, in general direction, as I mentioned before, I think that the basics of every company, the basic product of every company will be software in the future, and we're basically the thing that gives other people better software or helps them make better software. So we're like there's a gold rush, and we sell shovels, and that's a pretty good market to be in, I think.
Let's hope the gold is still there in a year.
There will always be startups. That's, I think, the nice thing about helping people build something. So I was always very passionate about helping others. So I'm not the extremely customer or like general populist kind of product focused person. I like building stuff that other people build upon. And there's always people building something, which is pretty nice. So I think we're not in startup world. Like there's a lot of discussion about like the Series A crunch, and like there's not enough investment money anymore, and all this kind of stuff, which there might be some numbers that show that, but in the end, like there will always be people building something interesting and willing to pay for good products. So I think that we're fine. And we're working on a lot of different technologies. Like we will release a new infrastructure soon that is a lot more flexible and can do a lot more stuff. So if any coders are here that'd be interested in knowing more about that, happy to talk to you guys later on and show it to you, or like give you access to that. But yeah, in general, I think I just like that market because it's building something for other people to build something is fun, is interesting. I feel kind of a team member of all of our customers in some ways, so that's pretty fun. And yeah, and I think in what you mentioned before, what's missing in Vienna, I think it's on the one side people need to push a lot harder. I think Vienna is it's really nice here. There isn't a lot of competition here in terms of like other people, like in Berlin, like a lot of people who are really good. Like there's a lot of really good Spanish people in Berlin because they moved from Spain, moved to Berlin. They're really good and they're pushing really, really hard. So the people in Berlin need to be a lot better at what they're doing, because otherwise somebody from another country that came and does the job much better will take the job, and that's how it should be. And I think that's something that doesn't really happen in Vienna a lot, because not a lot of people are moving in the tech sector specifically to Vienna. So there isn't really like, you don't really have to push extremely hard, I think, in many ways in Vienna. And I think that's a problem, because that stands against building a long-term large ecosystem.
Okay, great. So let's switch over to Q&A. There was one question already. I'm going to repeat it so that we have got it on the screen. So please.
Hey, my name is Philip from HappyMan, and I met Florian around 4 years ago, 5 years, and he told me that he's now CFO of a company called Rails on Fire, and I was on your website and I didn't have a clue what you were doing afterwards. And so, first of all, big respect what you built there. I followed that. You said before that for building a
So the question was about how to attract talent and like the right talent, the great talent, and what kind of incentives you can offer, maybe also especially in the early stages.
Yeah, so I think thanks for the shout out to Rails on Fire. That's been a while ago. Yeah, that was the old name of Codeship, basically. So I think it depends on the stage. I think most of the people that we hired over the last year or the last year and a half were hired because of vision and people. We hired them because we sat down with them and then told them who we are, how we operate, what they can learn from us, what we can learn from them, and what the vision of Codeship is. I mean, there's, as a small startup, like we raised some money, so we could pay competitively, but not like, I don't know, in Boston, like competitively is insane. And if a Google comes and wants to hire that person, then like it's over, basically. So you cannot sell on money. I think one of the perks that we have is that we have an office in Europe and in the US, so people can fly back and forth all the time, which is a lot easier for us, and a lot of other companies just simply can't do, even larger ones. But even that is like, that's a nice to have. But I think it's mostly around vision, people, team, culture, and I think about the opportunity to build something with it. I think it's, as the larger you grow, the more you have a culture, and people like will join that culture and can still help building it, but like there is more of a culture there. I think especially early on, it's about like, okay, we build something here, we build a product, but we also build a company and a team and a culture, and you should be part, and I think that you should be part of that. And I think specifically in hiring meetings, so something that took a while for me to understand is that when you want to hire somebody, the first meetings are sales meetings. You're selling yourself and then the company to that person. So I think that's something that I learned early on, that if you want to hire somebody, sit down with them, and you need to talk to them, and you need to sell your company and yourself to them. And don't forget to sell yourself, because that's also really important, because you're the first point of touch for them with the company. And they need to join. They need to want to join your company more than you want them in the company. Then they're ready that you have the conversation, and then you test them, and then you like do all the stuff that you need to do for hiring. But in my opinion, and we've done that mistake a couple of times, we tried to test them or like get through like the later stages of hiring way too early, when they weren't at a point where they wanted to join Codeship more than we wanted them. And so that's key. Like, it's a sales process. Hiring is in the beginning a sales process, and you need to sell yourself. And then it's vision and all this kind of stuff. But that's key. And identifying them. Don't go very broad in terms of like, I think looking over hundreds or thousands of people and then just selecting, or if you just select a few and really go a lot after them, that makes a lot more sense than sending out messages to hundreds of people and hoping that somebody comes back. And I think the other thing is nurturing relationships early on. So especially when you're in your university, like a lot of people that I talked to early on, like our first engineer was a university friend of mine. So I think nurturing those relationships, making sure that you talk to them regularly, tell them, and I think that's kind of it sounds kind of bad, but like you should try to keep them close and people that you want to work with close. And I do that all the time. And it sounds kind of berechnend, I don't know what the English word for that is, where you just meet for beer with somebody, because in the next company I might want to work with that guy. Also, I like that person, so I like to meet with that person. But there is something more. There's a little bit more sometimes in the back of your head, because you need to think about this: how can I get people in the future, all the time, if you want to do more companies in the future, because people are key.
Maybe a quick follow-on question: how do you develop culture? How do you do that inside Codeship? And what is your culture?
Sure.
Like you said, like, do you have like a slogan or whatever?
So, I mean, in terms of values, like we're currently actually writing about those values a lot. I think a lot of it is, I think the way we are is we're extremely feedback driven. So in general driven by work, but I think something that is very, very important for us is very direct and very fast feedback, and being very focused. So when we don't like something, or somebody doesn't like something, or like thinks it could be improved upon, telling that exactly, and having regular one-on-one meetings with a lot of people during the company, and just giving them very direct and very constructive feedback. And I think that's something that is really important for us. I think that willingness and that understanding that we're not, as a person, nobody in the companies is where we need to be when we want to be a $1 billion company. Nobody. So we need to get there as a person and as a company. So everybody needs to learn, and we can only do that if we get constant feedback from everybody else in the team that pushes us further, and so that we can get better. And that feedback is good, and feedback is necessary, and learning from other people, or even like, I don't know, when I talk to our VP of engineering, like it's really important for me. I'm doing this job for the first time. I don't really know, like how should I know what a CTO really does? I talk to a lot of people about it, but I don't know. So it's really important for me that other people tell me, like, how can I help you? Like, what do I do on a daily basis that maybe doesn't help you? And I just don't know. So please tell me, then I just don't do this anymore and do something better instead. So I think that's really key, and that makes the team way more effective. If you have this kind of extremely strong feedback and very direct feedback culture, where you're not waiting around and you don't mince words and you just are very direct and say like, this is not good, or I don't like this, but here is how we could do it better, or how you reacted in this way is really not very good for those particular reasons and stuff like that.
Okay, more questions? Had to be more question. Oh, no.
I understand that first of all you need to have a good product. But could you perhaps elaborate a little bit more on your marketing issue? What is key to marketing?
Sorry, I'll need to repeat for it. So the product, of course, is very important, but what is key on the marketing side with your product?
So I think in general, I think you don't necessarily just need a good product in the beginning. I think it needs to go hand in hand. Good people are important though, as first. But I think in terms of the marketing, so a lot of things that we do, for example, is we don't necessarily educate people about our product all the time, but we just want to educate people. So we write a lot of blog posts. We have a lot of blogs on our blog that just tell them about like how they can be better developers, how they can do specific technology things better, how they can use a specific technology. And in most of those blog posts, Codeship, if it's mentioned, it's just very briefly mentioned. Because that builds trust. Like what we want people to do and developers to do is that they certainly have that problem. Like I know that every developer has, or every development team has this problem. There is no development team that does not have this problem. They may have solved it in some ways, but they need to deal with this. Every single development team needs to deal with what we have. So the question is, how can we make sure that they want to choose us over others? And so I think having a great product is there, but building the trust that they come to us, and not just because of the product, but because they have the trust in us that we can do this longer term, and we will not just have a great product today, but we will have a better product tomorrow, and a far better product than anybody else in the competition in a year. So, and I think that's something that we put a lot of effort on in our marketing, is how can we build trust and those kind of evangelists. So something that like probably the most effective marketing campaign that we've done, or that we'll keep on doing, is if you go to codeship.com/swag and just give us your address, we'll send you a shirt, stickers, and a handwritten note written by the mother of one of our marketing guys from Kurt. And we send that everywhere. Everywhere. We get like return packages sometimes when the address is wrong. From like a couple of days ago, I picked out, I think, one from China, one from the US, I think one from Australia, and then one from the first district. For some reason, it didn't get delivered to the first district.
Austrian Post.
Yeah. But I think so that's something that really works well, because it builds, like, we send out the shirts, and so people tweet about us, people talk about us. I think this kind of grassroots and building trust and building those kinds of evangelists, and building people who really love Codeship for what Codeship is and for the team, and using us and our team and our culture as a marketing material as well is really key. Because then you build, we recently had something where somebody wrote us an email and said, look, a competitor of yours talked to me about writing a blog post. I wrote this blog post, but then I thought about it, and then I thought, like, actually, my allegiance is actually to you guys. So, hey, do we want to have a blog post? And we're like, yes. And that blog post did really well. And so that was really, really cool. That showed like how deep of a connection there is between people and our brand, but also our team. Because that was a guy that we met at conferences who's really nice, who really likes us. We talked to in support. Like, having great support is good marketing, because that means they trust you. They tell other people that they trust you. I think this kind of thing really worked well for us. So education and building kind of evangelists that go out and tell others about us is really key, and works really well, and is comparatively cheap in terms of like other things that we've done.
Okay, any more questions? I can ask questions for the next 2 hours, so it's your turn.
Happy to answer questions over a beer as well later on.
Yeah, there's like private sessions as well. There is one more, two more. First row first.
As I understood, you were in Techstars in Boston, right? Not in Berlin. From what I've heard, like the model that Techstars does now to expand to different cities is sort of a franchise thing where a completely different company sets up the program. Do you have any experience with the quality of these programs? Because
So
the same people there.
So
And the follow-up question to that, would Techstars have been as valuable for you as it was if after the program you would have moved back to Berlin, Vienna, wherever?
so there was
Wouldn't have stayed in Boston.
So there was a question regarding Techstars. First question was basically Techstars is currently growing and expanding as a franchise system, and what your view is on that, and if you have any experience on that. And the follow-up question was then, if I got it correctly, would you, if you would have moved back from Techstars, like did it and moved back, would that be like, what is your view on that?
So Texas was always franchise. So Boston is a franchise. So Texas was founded in Boulder and in Colorado. And although franchise, so it's still the same fund. So you still get an investment from the Techstars fund. It's just different general managers running it per city. And I think so. What is incredibly important is you have to go and look at the general manager of any program and how it works specifically. We had a great combination of 3 people that were very experienced entrepreneurs, some of them technical, some of them non-technical, and had that great mix of, one of them was like a really like quiet guy who gave you like insightful comments and then you thought about it and it was really intelligent. Then there was the tech guy who was also like kind of quiet and so. And then there was Katie, who's just, and I mean that in the best possible way, an absolute beast, who's going to, she's awesome. And she's like, if she finds any kind of weakness in your pitch or in any question, she jumps on that and pushes you as hard as she possibly can. And that was awesome. Having that kind of mix of 3 people was incredibly helpful. I think also for the CEO specifically, that she mentored a lot. I think that was incredibly important. And so that was really, really good. Those 3 were really good. I don't know the people from Berlin specifically. I know London a bit. Generally, like, they don't take anybody. So my general assumption would be if they are a general manager in Techstars, they're probably really, really smart and really experienced. But you should definitely talk to people who worked with them before. People maybe like look where they worked before and find somebody there. Other companies that they invested in before Techstars or something like that. Like all this kind of history. I think that's just like due diligence. I think due diligence is not something that only investors do, but that startups need to do as well. So I think that's really important to find out in any kind of investment vehicle, and also how much time they spend. I think one of the critical things, so what happened in Boston a lot is that they were in the same office, and if you wanted to talk to them, you just went to them and just said like, hey, do you have 20 minutes? And then you just sat down and talked about something. That was really key. If you have a general manager that is somewhere all the time and doesn't spend a lot of time with like the companies, like then you get basically a very expensive office. So that's not really cool. So that's, I think, really informing yourself well about how the specifics of the program are, and specifically the general manager, the person running it. That's really key.
And the second question was the impact if you would have moved back.
Yeah. So I mean, we definitely would have learned something. It's hard because I never really considered it. I think for us, yeah, it wasn't something that we even really thought about at all. I think that there would definitely have been an impact for us because we as a person would have learned a lot, as people would have grown a lot. On the company itself, it just would have been a stupid idea for us specifically. But yeah, I think generally like the program definitely taught us a lot and helped us to grow a lot as people grow together and see the much bigger. I think something that you see is companies who are doing really well, and you meet a lot of companies that are doing really well, and you want to do really well then as well, and you see how much they work, so you know like, okay, we have to do more to get there basically. So that's been a great push and really helpful. Yeah, that's also something that I think surrounding yourself with people who work really, really hard, much harder than you ever thought you could, really helps because that pushes you a lot.
Okay, there was another question.
You said raising an angel round here is pretty hard. So we made the same experience. What is the big difference between, let's say, Austrian investors and US or German investors from the mindset that you figured out?
So the question was about the angel round because you said it's very difficult here.
And next question, what do we need to change if we want to go with an Austrian mindset to the US to raise money?
So the first question was, what is the difference between an Austrian angel first investor and maybe a US or a German investor? And the follow-up question was, what do we need to change in our mindset as startups when we want to raise money somewhere, US or somewhere?
So I think in terms of investors, so the problem is that there are simply way fewer here. Like there's just a lot more millionaires in San Francisco or in Boston that made their money from tech. So a lot more people who understand tech, who understand software business and invest in those companies. So I think that's a big difference, which is one that we just cannot change short term here. So I think that's something where it's especially hard for people to raise like 20 or 30,000 euros or like even 15,000 euros, like small things. Like it's not about like a lot of money, something that you can live off for like 2 people for 6 months on a like the cheapest way possible and just build your stuff. I think that's just something that is really hard to do here from an angel because there's very few who do that here. I think I think that the Pioneers Fund now, however that works exactly, is going in that direction. But I think the typical suite place for like most other investors here is a little bit on the little bit larger, a little bit beyond just 20K, because they're institutional investors. Like a Speed Invest is an institutional investor. My assumption would be they don't do $25,000 checks. They might at this point. I don't know. I know that they didn't in the past when we talked to them. But in the beginning you don't need 150,000, and you're not in a place to get 150,000. That doesn't make any sense. So you need something small, and I think that's a general issue that you have here. And one that can be solved over longer term when more people, like the run-testy guys, make a lot of money and then invest that back. So I think that's why something like having grants and investing in 10 companies and 8 of those go to the US, or 10 of those go to the US, 8 of those stay there, 2 come back and are really rich and then invest in other companies, makes a lot of sense. Exactly for this reason. So we get more experienced people here that can help and invest in others. I think that would be a good start. Generally, it's just going to be hard for a while. I think that's in Austria, it's just not really, slowly will get better, but it's going to be hard to really get better. And I think like I would probably move to Berlin.
Okay, thanks. Was another question, that's the last one.
Do you have a strategy for reducing taxes just in case your business will grow?
In case it will grow?
So we have
it's about tax questions.
So we have tax lawyers. That's basically we have a guy. It's basically the answer to that. So that's just something we do. Especially we have it like more complex, but yeah. So we have good lawyers that take care of it. Sorry, there was a second question. What can we do when we go to the US before? How should we change? One of the big issues and we had a couple of other European teams in the same class as we were. We all are very modest, and that's a huge issue. Like in the beginning, it was really weird for us to go like, and we want to build $1 billion company. And it isn't weird anymore because we've said it like so many times now that it's fine. But like for all Europeans, it's like, wait, what? You want to build? Like that's strange. Like why you do say something like, isn't that really large? And yeah, it is. But you have to say something. Like we have to stop being modest. In general, I think in Europe to some degree as well in the startup ecosystem, but also in the US, like don't put yourself down. Like leave that, like if they don't take you seriously, like leave it to them, but don't take yourself not seriously. I don't know if that made sense. But yeah, don't be modest. Don't be modest, like go there. And like, I think that's also like you're selling on your vision and where you're going. If you go in to an investor or a person when you want to hire them and go in with like, yeah, we might be like an interesting company at some point or something like that, that's not really going to work. Like and the Americans are awesome at that. They go in and like, we will crush everything. We'll be the biggest and baddest in the ecosystem that we target, and we're gonna be the biggest company where we're gonna make you so much money here, and we're gonna make you richer than you already are. And that's just something that at least Europeans, or like at least Austrians, but I've seen other Europeans not feel comfortable with the same way. We just don't do, and that's something that you need to drop. The earlier that you can drop it, the better, basically.
So don't be modest. I think that's
Don't be modest at all.
I think that's a nice finishing word from Flo. Thank you very much. Give him one round of applause.
Thank you.
So before we step over to have some pizza and some nice evening, maybe outside on the terrace, because today is pretty nice and warm. Some quick ones. Not yet fixed with the date. Our next meetups is going to be with Harald Mara, the state secretary. He's like, politician, but what most people don't know, he's serial entrepreneur. He's done a couple of angel works within Austria, so he knows what he's talking about. Not saying anything about other politicians in Austria. So he's going to be with us in September, and in October we're going to have Bianca of Kiveno, who moved from IM Nuvi, her first startup, then they moved and changed, and now got an investment by Hansi Hansmann, again an Hansmann founded company with us, and she was going to tell us a bit about how they grew from the first idea, IM Nuvi, into Kiveno, that's now doing quite well. So that's about that. That's our next two ones. We've got everything lined up to November. December's not going to be happening, but I'm not going to tell you what's going on in November. I'd like to thank our sponsors. First of all, I don't know if Laura is here, Sector 5, they are doing a marvelous job supporting us. Always like, yeah, do that. Yeah, we need that and that. Yeah, that's fine. So we love Sector 5. Sector 5 is great. It's a good thing for the community. So thank you to them. The other one is Trigo. I don't know, I haven't seen David in here. He should be here from Trigo. As far as I know, they do individual software development. So if you know something they might need, they also do Docker consulting, like Docker, not consulting. They train you on Docker if you're interested in that. They're very, very helpful. They always say like, yeah, we're going to take over part of the sponsoring, so part of the pizzas from them and part of the drinks also. So they're also great. And another one of those companies who make our life very easy here, StartUpGrind, is Holvi, a little banking startup from Finland. It's not so little anymore. I don't know where Hannes is today. He's with us usually. So they make us do a series, visit their blog. They're doing a great job. If you need an account, go to them. I love them. I actually use them for 2 associations that I had. So that's great. So thank you, all of them. Thank you. And we have B-Video with us today. So we're live streaming in the future. If it worked, did it work, Hannes? It did work quite well. So maybe we have a look at that. So thank you, B-Video. And that's our sponsors. Please follow us, like us, follow us on Twitter, so you get all the information about the next events on time. Tomorrow is going to be the start for the next event, the advertising start. You find all videos on our YouTube channel, and I think that's enough of advertising and blah blah. Let's go grab some pizza.